Think back to 2016, right at the absolute peak of the market. A sprawling 9,200 square foot mansion up on Victoria Peak sold for a mind-boggling $256 million US. It was the ultimate trophy asset in what was, at the time, the most expensive real estate market on the planet.
But fast forward to today, and we're looking at a catastrophic 50% discount. Creditors are now swooping in, seizing those exact same trophy assets, and receivers are shopping them around with estimates plunging to roughly $128 million. And honestly, this isn't just one unlucky foreclosure. We've seen overall residential property prices slide a massive 20 to 25% from the 2021 peak.
You know, this financial exodus extends right into the city's commercial real estate too. We're currently seeing a record 16.4% vacancy rate across the entire city. Millions of square feet of premium glass and steel, buildings originally designed to house the titans of global banking, are just sitting there completely empty. So, here's the absolutely crucial question that's going to guide our explainer today. How exactly did a 150-year-old libertarian utopia, a system engineered purely for making money, suddenly collapse?
Section 2. Designing the Economic Fortress. To answer that, we've got to rewind all the way to the 19th century and understand the sheer audacity of this territory's original blueprint.
It's crazy to think about, but Hong Kong was actually born out of a math problem. The British Empire was buying mountains of Chinese tea, but they had to pay for it exclusively in silver. To flip that trade imbalance, Britain set up a shadow economy, mass-producing opium in India to sell in China. When Chinese authorities fought back by destroying the opium in 1839, the British sent in the Royal Navy, kicking off the First Opium War. Fast forward through a series of conflicts, and by 1898, Britain secured a crucial 99-year lease on the mainland New Territories. This gave them a huge buffer zone, but, and this is absolutely key, it came with a very hard expiration date. Of course, all this global commerce needed localized finance, so the British essentially built an autonomous economic fortress by creating HSBC in 1865. The bank became absolutely dominant, acting as a de facto central bank. Even today, it still issues over 50% of all Hong Kong dollar banknotes in circulation. Supplied with limitless liquidity, Hong Kong evolved into a jurisdiction built by capital, for capital.
Section 3. The Ultimate Capitalist Experiment. Let's jump ahead to the post-war era to explore the radical, laissez-faire capitalism that sparked explosive industrialization. This really kicked into high gear after 1949, when a massive influx of refugees flooded across the border, bringing with them highly motivated, cheap labor.
The contrast here is just fascinating. Over in post-war London, they were busy building this sprawling welfare state with high taxes and heavy government intervention. But in Hong Kong, a colonial administrator named Sir John Cooperthwaite looked at that model and basically said, absolutely not. He implemented a strict ban on macroeconomic forecasting. He literally forbade his team from calculating GDP. He thought the math would just tempt politicians to start meddling. As a result, the state levied 0 taxes on sales, 0 on capital gains, and 0 on dividends. Income tax, hard capped at a tiny 15%. Which naturally brings us to an obvious mathematical puzzle, right? If you aren't collecting standard taxes, how on earth do you build and maintain a sprawling, world-class global financial hub? Well, the answer comes down to just one single word: land. The British Crown, and later the Hong Kong government, held an absolute monopoly on the land supply. It's wild to consider, but 75% of the city's surface area remains totally untouched, empty jungle. By artificially restricting the supply of land, the government purposely inflated prices. They'd release these tiny little parcels to developers at public auction. It's known as the rail plus property model, and it meant the government subsidized its entire operation through massive land premiums, keeping direct taxes at 0 for the global elite. But the trade-off? The local population got stuck paying the absolute highest housing costs in the world, with the median living space shrinking down to a microscopic 172 square feet per person. Despite that intense burden on individuals, economically speaking, this strategy was an unprecedented success. Wealth just exploded between 1960 and 1996. By 1997, Hong Kong's per capita income had completely eclipsed the British Isles. It actually prompted the famous American economist Milton Friedman to say, if you want to see capitalism in action, if you want to see the free market really working, this is the place to go. The city essentially became a devotional object for the global free market.
Section 4. The 1997 expiration date.
But here is the catch. Built right into the very foundation of this incredible economic fortress was a fatal structural flaw.
Remember that 99-year lease we talked about? Well, a staggering 86% of the territory, including critical things like power plants, reservoirs, and the airport, was sitting right on that leased land, and the expiration date was locked in for July 1st, 1997. It was basically a ticking clock, setting up a massive, inevitable collision between a democratic-leaning capitalist hub and a communist superpower.
To calm down terrified financial markets and stop a massive flight of global capital, the Sino-British Joint Declaration was signed. This created the famous doctrine of one country, two systems. It was legally binding, and it forced Beijing to preserve Hong Kong's capitalist framework, its independent judiciary, and that zero tax structure all the way until 2047. The economic firewall was officially installed.
Section 5. The firewall demolished. As we know, that system turned out to be politically incredibly fragile. Let's trace the friction that ultimately tore the firewall down.
We can chronologically map how the legal certainty just unraveled. It really kicked off in 2019 when an estimated 2 million people hit the streets to protest a proposed extradition bills to the mainland. In response, right on the eve of the 2020 handover anniversary, Beijing bypassed the local legislature and drafted the national security law in absolute secrecy. This essentially criminalized subversion and claimed global extraterritorial jurisdiction. Fast forward to 2024, and domestic legislation started targeting external interference, which meant routine corporate due diligence suddenly turned into potential espionage liabilities. And then, by March 2026, new mandates made it a criminal offense for anyone, even a corporate executive just transiting through the airport, to refuse to hand over decryption passwords to local police. Just like that, the unique commercial legal framework effectively evaporated.
Section 6. The New Hong Kong. So let's come back to the present day and see how this political rewrite structurally dismantled a 150-year-old financial engine.
The thing is, global capital demands legal certainty. When that's gone, the money simply walks. The exodus has been stark. Between 2019 and 2023, the number of single-family wealth offices in Singapore skyrocketed from 400 to over 1,400. Major players like FedEx moved the regional headquarters, and hedge funds fled 1,600 miles south. Why? Because they needed to secure that exact same English common law foundation, just without the unpredictable reach of a sprawling intelligence apparatus.
Now, to be completely fair, the stock market did eventually bounce back. Fueled heavily by state-backed mainland funds, the Hang Seng were covered past 25,000 by 2026. But it underwent a total metamorphosis. By the end of 2024, mainland Chinese companies were generating over 80% of the daily trading volume. British conglomerates and broader global capital, they mostly retreated. So, the market basically stopped functioning as an independent global entity and turned into an offshore fundraising arm for the People's Republic.
And all of this culminates in a massive fiscal crisis. Remember how we said the government funded itself strictly by selling land leases? Well, with transaction volumes collapsing and global capital heading for the exits, the government only collected a tiny fraction of its projected land revenue. As a direct result, their historical financial reserves just burned up, violently plunging from 1.17 trillion Hong Kong dollars in 2018 down to around 700 billion by 2024. That non-interventionist machine required constantly skyrocketing land values and infinite foreign capital to survive. And it just hit a brick wall.
For decades, the working assumption was that deep global financial integration would act as a shield and guarantee autonomy. But that turned out to be a massive miscalculation. Which leaves us with this final, truly provocative thought. When a rising superpower is forced to choose between maintaining the world's most dynamic capitalist bridge and enforcing absolute political obedience, which one survives? The statistics have been rewritten, the legal firewalls are gone, and the ultimate libertarian experiment has been completely erased from the map. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep asking questions, and I'll catch you next time.